In this world, there's two kinds of people, my friend. Those with loaded guns and those who dig. Broadcasting from a Montana wilderness fortress at the headwaters of the Missouri, this is Matt Christiansen Live.
The thing about Biden is he's done a wonderful job over the course of his career, just a wonderful job.
Well, I have to disagree with that.
And I go around the country in New York State or Ohio, and there are manufacturing jobs coming back.
I doubt it.
But as Frank Ford wrote in The Atlantic today, his job was to fight authoritarianism. The whole thing was to preserve democracy. And the election of Donald Trump suggested, to some large degree, he failed at that large mission. And so, in some sense, a wonderful guy. He's been a great public service, but there's a sadness and a tragedy at the end of it.
Don't you understand, you dumb son of a bitch? Don't you understand?
I don't know if it's so much that he failed. I just wonder if, with these results, the American people just sort of gave up on democracy. Hey, let's try this authoritarianism.
Heil Hitler, baby.
You are fake news.
You serious?
Stop being such a pussy. Very fake news.
I'm speaking to you tonight from the Oval Office. This will be my final address to you from the American people from the Oval Office, from this desk as president.
No one cares! Shut up, bitch!
All right, America, go to the YouTube right now.
Skag free, whoever he is.
Dude, Matt straight up sucks.
How dare you!
All right, go.
In 5, 4, 3.
I can't do it. We'll do it live.
Fuck it, we'll do it live!
Hello and welcome to the show. This is Matt Christiansen Live for Sunday, January 19th, 2025, Inauguration Eve. Thank you for tuning in. Are we actually about to watch this happen? To watch Trump become president again without any interruptions or surprises or interventions? I remain skeptical. I maintain it is still far too quiet out there, but it's been far too quiet for months now. So maybe the spirit of the opposition is finally defeated, finally broken, finally dead. We'll find out tomorrow. Of course, the return of Trump necessarily means the end of Biden, so we will properly memorialize everyone associated. Biden himself, the memory of Beau, and Karine Jean-Pierre. Stand by for that. I have a great guest tonight. Liz Collin is a reporter at Alpha News in Minnesota and the producer of The Fall of Minneapolis. That's a documentary all about the death of George Floyd and all the aftermath. As I posted a video about, a week or two ago, she is now being sued by the assistant chief of the Minneapolis Police Department for supposed defamation in her documentary, in her book. It's a great conversation. She knows absolutely everything there is to know about the Derek Chauvin, George Floyd saga. So I'll get to that in about a half hour is my aim. Afterward, we'll check in on the rest of the big news of the week. As of this hour, TikTok is back online. It was offline. Now it's back. It was banned per federal law that was passed and signed last year, trying to force the sale of the Chinese-owned company. We'll see what now Trump is working with ByteDance, the owner, and so you can TikTok once again. We'll check in with that story and how that's all developing. Joe Biden declares a 28th Amendment to the Constitution on his way out of office. Only problem is constitutional amendments, of course, aren't declared. But, who cares? He leaves tomorrow and he's been dead for months anyway. So let's just try it. And before I'm done, I have hoax hate as well, of course, including, yes, yet another case of transgender affection gone wrong, otherwise known as the fraudulent blowy.
That's disgusting.
Kill me!
And we'll catch up with your super chats as well. $10 and up on the Sunday show because I am a no good, low down money grabber. Our friend Knuckle Hunky Buck will join to read super chat once again. Speaking of, hey, if you enjoy the show, please consider supporting the show. You can do that for as little as $1 a month on my website. That's mattchristiansenmedia.com or mattis.gay. It's a real website. Listener support is what keeps my operation running. And of course, it is hugely appreciated. There are perks available for your support as well. MattChristiansenMedia.com/support. Linked in the description. And we got to say hi to our featured listener-owned business for the evening. And that's our friends at Hero Soap Company. And what do we have here? We have a special commemorative soap just for the inauguration of the 45th and now 47th President of the United States, come this time tomorrow, Donald Trump. And so the soap is titled 47. 47 has a smoky cedar wood scent that is bold and refreshing, like a celebratory cigar to appreciate the moment. It is great soap, terrific soap, tremendous soap, frankly, the best. And you can ask anyone about that. People often do, I'm told. 47 soap, by the way, it's a limited run. It is while supplies last. So you can find the link in the description. Or, crap, did I forget to put that in the description? I will after the show. Head on over to herosoapcompany.com. Let me double check. I think it's on the homepage, since I can't be trusted to run my own promotions. Head on over to herosoapcompany.com and look in the bar soap section. You will find the new 47 soap. And I'll do better with making the discovery of that soap easier for you next time, at least if you're a live viewer. Anyway, and of course, if you head on over to Hero Soap Company and you pick up some 47 soap or any of their products, bar soap, liquid body soap, shampoo, conditioner, cologne, and more, promo code MC Listener for 10% off any and all of it. Get your Trump inaugural soap 47 while supplies last. But getting into the news, hey, the world may be healing. One side of that, oops, let me pull up the right story here. Gosh, man, the duct tape is running strong tonight, but, I do what I can. The world may be healing a little bit. The newly acquitted Daniel Penny is back to his old life, it looks like. He's once again riding the New York City subway. Although he doesn't have his former anonymity, of course. I wonder how much he gets recognized while he's riding the subway once again. While he did, someone grabbed a photo of him. There he is. He's reading a book. His hood is up. Unclear what exactly the book is. Now, at the time of the 2023 incident, that of course put him on trial for manslaughter, he was a student and he would ride the subway to go to school. So maybe he's returned to his studies. I don't know. I will note that Daniel Penny has been very quiet since his acquittal in that manslaughter trial in December. Now, I would assume he just doesn't want a lot of public attention, just wants to get back to his old life, and who could blame him? I don't think he wanted that situation ever thrown upon him. It's just what happened to him. Now, there are still a lot of legal matters to resolve in this case. Penny's lawyers are saying they are still considering a malicious prosecution lawsuit against the Manhattan District Attorney's Office because, of course, the case never should have been brought in the first place. As far as I'm aware, I haven't seen any movement on that. After his acquittal, Penny's lawyers were saying, yeah, we might bring a malicious lawsuit prosecution against Alvin Bragg and Company. Haven't seen more information on that. But, of course, we also have the lawsuit from Jordan Neely's dad, who has returned from the abyss after decades of absence from his son's life to try to collect a check from Daniel Penny.
You suck, fuck you.
Sucks at being a dad and sucks at being a man of decency. Of course, he's trying to ruin another man's life, that being Daniel Penny's, to collect a check or make up for his own failures as a father. Andre Zachary is his name. He's pursuing this wrongful death lawsuit against Daniel Penny, seeking unspecified damages. Now, Penny's team did move to have the case dismissed earlier this month. As far as I've seen, no decision on that yet. So we'll see where that case goes. But, I mentioned the world is healing. There's reason for optimism. Maybe not. Maybe the world is exactly the same as it always has been, or maybe it's getting worse, at least in California. And of course, the southern part of the state is still on fire. California problems remain. They are immortal, perhaps. Everyone's still stealing, of course. Was talking about that last video. Doesn't matter. You change the law, they're still going to steal. And of course, as legally intended, or at least legally allowed to a certain extent, not fully. They didn't fully legalize it. But remember a few years ago, State Senator Scott Wiener famously decriminalized the intentional transmission of HIV in California. It's just a misdemeanor now. So mostly you can freely distribute all your HIV if you like. It's just a slap on the wrist. Or maybe a perfectly appropriate slap on the ass for all your HIV distribution. But I missed the update. I mentioned this story back around Thanksgiving. I missed the update that came out last week, so I am Jen Psaki circling back to it. Now, back at Thanksgiving when this story first came out, I described this story as the most California story I've ever heard. The subject of the story is a man named Franklin Enrique Sarceño Orla. He is a 34-year-old barber in Mountain View, or he was. Nobody knows where he is anymore, but that's south of San Francisco. And he has disappeared after he was charged in several different sexual assaults, or at least 2, but he's believed to be behind many different sexual assaults. Specifically, he was charged with sexually assaulting these 2 men. He allegedly kidnapped one of his own barbershop clients. And upon investigation, it is believed that Orla did this to up to 20 different men. He would capture them through the use of drugs or other means. He would bring them to his home. In some cases, he would restrain them, and he would sexually assault them in various ways. Now, why is Orla on the run? Well, it's because, again, this is the most California story ever. He's on the run because he left after he posted bail. So this guy is capturing people, raping them in his residence, gets caught, gets charged. They let him out on bail, and oh my gosh, he disappeared. Imagine that. So, yes, California found this guy collecting victims in his rape dungeon. They let him walk away. Now they can't find him. The only way to make the story more California is if it turns out that he's an illegal immigrant, which is certainly possible, but I haven't seen information to that effect yet. So why the update? Well, officials now believe that Orla is HIV positive. So if you were captured into his rape dungeon, it is time to get tested.
New details tonight about a Mountain View barber on the run after being accused of sexual assaults. Court documents say 34-year-old Franklin Enrique Sarceño Orla has HIV, and authorities are urging his victims to get tested. Orla is now accused in more than 24 drugged sex assaults dating back to 2018. Police say he took off after missing his last court date while out on bail. If convicted, he faces life in prison.
Many of those people probably have AIDS.
They certainly do now. It's not probably. Or maybe they actually had AIDS to begin with. So maybe it's not that big of a deal, at least with regard to the AIDS. The rape is still a problem, though. And of course, California law enforcement would still like to resolve the matter. Now, I think I know where he's hiding. If Bay Area law enforcement wants a little tip. I hear he is hiding right behind the working fire hydrant in LA, which of course is impossible to find. All right, I'm not going to delay the moment, the ceremony any further. Trump taking office tomorrow means that Joe Biden is gone. Now, he's been gone for months or years, who knows? But tomorrow he will be formally gone. He will become a former president, assuming things go to plan. Now, I made the mistake of saying I was going to do these memorials, these I will remember you bits ahead of time. Now, of course, everybody knew I was going to do that. I'd never miss the opportunity. I love putting together these bits. But that creates elevated expectations when I say I'm going to do it. Now, how could I possibly make a satisfactory montage of 4+ years of Joe Biden gaffes and fit that into a minute? I can't. It's impossible. There's just too much. So I decided I'm going to keep this simple, even if it's a little disappointing for people, because I can't possibly meet the sky-high expectations without producing some kind of James Cameron 3-hour epic of Joe Biden gaffes. So I just have to keep it simple. I'm going to pick just the most consequential moments of the Joe Biden presidency. So here it is. We will remember Joe Biden.
We've all seen the pictures. We've seen those hundreds of people packed into a C-17. We've seen Afghans falling.
That was 4 days ago, 5 days ago.
So you don't think this could have been handled, this actually could have been handled better in any way?
The idea that somehow there's a way to have gotten out without chaos ensuing, I don't know how that happens.
So for you, that was always priced into the decision?
Yes.
Will you remember me?
I don't want to hear any more of these lies about reckless spending. We're changing people's lives.
Don't let your life.
Look, if we finally beat Medicare.
I think I would have beaten Trump, could have beaten Trump, and I think that Kamala could have beaten Trump. Would have beaten Trump.
Now, of course, I close with Joe Biden falling up the stairs deliberately. As I mentioned previously, it's the greatest political metaphor of all time. Joe Biden stumbling, Joe Biden falling, but somehow still ascending. It represents his entire career. But to the sequence of events that I think are worthy of review, I chose the Afghanistan exchange there with George Stephanopoulos. That was the point that Joe Biden's presidency really turned around, where his popularity permanently tanked with the American public. It's late August, early September, right in there of 2021, the first year of his presidency. That's when the Afghanistan withdrawal happens. That entire disaster completely flips public opinion. Joe Biden is underwater in popularity or favorability, and he never recovers. It goes decidedly negative from there. Joe Biden yelling about inflation, about the lies of government spending causing inflation. Oh, I don't want to hear any more of these lies. He's changing people's lives, of course. Inflation in a poor economy, of course, were another major downfall of his presidency. And of course, Joe Biden finally beating Medicare in the debate against Trump in June. That was the moment where everybody finally stopped pretending that this guy had any mental capacity left. And of course, shortly after that, the point at which he left the campaign and effectively left politics, though the question of how and why he remained president if he wasn't capable of running for president for months after the fact remains unanswered. But one of the ironies of Joe Biden's presidency, and he sat in the Oval Office and told us all about his successes on Wednesday night. Americans sure have trouble naming those successes. There's a poll conducted for the Daily Mail by a firm called JL Partners. And it asked people of various party affiliation, 1,000 different respondents, to name or describe the accomplishments of the Joe Biden presidency. And Democrats, Republicans, and independents actually finally agree somewhat, at least generally. They all respond mostly nothing. If you look at the word cloud for the responses, nothing is the overwhelming answer, regardless of party affiliation or ideological persuasion. It was the overwhelming response among Republicans. It was still a popular response among Democrats. In fact, the most popular one among Democrats. According to the poll, a majority of respondents overall could not name a single Biden achievement. Even a third of Democrats say they can't name a single Biden accomplishment. And according to a poll by the same firm, Joe Biden is also the least successful president of roughly the last 50 years. Since Nixon, the worst president in modern memory, according to responses to this particular poll. Now, I'm not going to break down that ridiculous Oval Office address from Wednesday. There's a brief mention of part of it I want to get to later in the show. But since Biden is leaving, so is his meme counterpart, Dank Brandon, an AI creation courtesy of Prison Mitch or Midnight Mitch on X. Dank Brandon has checked in with the stream a few times, but of course, this is his farewell address. And Dank, we won't be hearing from Dank Brandon anymore, I assume, which is, unfortunate. Dank Brandon reminded us all of the help he's had from his aides or something like that.
Hello, Americans. It's your boy, Dank Brandon, coming to you for the last time. I'd like to thank my aides. And no, I don't mean the kind I got from giving Magic Johnson that Medal of Freedom. Doc says I have nothing to worry about because I'm dying anyways. What was it talking about? Oh, yeah, AIDS. The staff here at the White House are the real heroes. I had to work about 45 grueling days in the last 4 years, and the AIDS ran the country. All right, now I'm fucking done with this bullshit. Dank Brandon, out.
Many of those people probably have AIDS.
Dank Brandon has plenty of AIDS. I do believe that the AIDS ran the country. I think that was a perfectly credible, sincere point, but I think that's more than enough AIDS talk tonight. So moving on. Of course, Joe Biden had a persistent habit throughout his presidency. He would remember his late son, Beau Biden, who died of brain cancer in 2015. And it's not just that Joe would remember his deceased son. There's nothing wrong with that. Of course, a death of your child is tragic regardless of how old you are. Everybody can sympathize with that. The problem with the memory of Beau Biden is that it was always invoked at completely inappropriate times. Anytime there was mourning of other people after a tragedy, after a death, Joe would take the moment for himself and remind everyone that, hey, don't forget, Beau died, so I know exactly what it's like. So likewise, in saying goodbye to the Joe Biden presidency, it's only appropriate we also will remember Beau Biden.
President Biden calling Oneida and Sean Sanders, whose 24-year-old daughter Kennedy was killed in the attack.
I know there's nothing anybody can say or do to ease the pain. I've been there.
Will you remember me?
For all the families of our fallen officers, I know when my son Beau spent a year in Iraq, came home with stage 4 glioblastoma, was going to die, and he did.
Don't let your light.
It's not the same, but I know a little bit about what it's like to lose a piece of your soul. Lincoln Riley, an innocent young woman who was killed by an illegal. To her parents, I say, my heart goes out to you, having lost children myself. I understand.
He knows exactly what grief feels like. Now, it's a different kind of grief. I understand that.
There's even reference that I don't remember when my son died. How in the hell dare he raise that? Frankly, when I was asked the question, I thought to myself, it wasn't any of their damn business.
I will remember you.
Just to remember all the circumstances in which Beau was invoked, that first clip is a family, a Gold Star family whose daughter in the Army was killed in a drone strike in Jordan. And Joe calls him up and says, I know exactly what it's like because Beau. And I believe as part of that conversation, he also once again falsely said that Beau died in Iraq. That was about this time last year. The second clip was Joe Biden speaking at a National Peace Officers Memorial Service in D.C. last May, as in a memorial for cops killed. Oh, some criminal shot your cop husband or your cop dad dead? Well, Joe knows exactly what that's like because Beau. The third clip is Joe Biden speaking at the collapsed Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore last April after the cargo ship hit the bridge, of course. There were several road construction workers who died in the collapse, but Joe knows exactly what that is like, too, because Beau also abruptly drowned in the early morning hours after falling off a bridge. On a related note, when Biden spoke at that event, he also said that he traveled by train over that bridge all the time when he was commuting from D.C. to Delaware. Problem is, that bridge is car only. There's no train traffic over that bridge.
That was 4 days ago, 5 days ago.
I don't want to hear any more of these lies.
The fourth clip is Joe Biden at the State of the Union last March, remembering, as he put it, USC football coach Lincoln Riley, but he meant Laken Riley, the Georgia nursing student killed by an illegal immigrant. Remember, he got in trouble for calling the guy an illegal. Nancy Pelosi browbeat him for that. But Joe addressed Laken Riley's parents because, of course, Joe knows exactly what it's like. Beau also had his skull crushed by a rapey, murderous, illegal immigrant. The fifth clip was National Security Advisor John Kirby discussing the disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal 3 years after the fact, this last August, 2024. Joe Biden knows exactly what it's like to have your kid needlessly blown up by the Taliban and ISIS-K for no reason other than Joe Biden has some political urgency to get everybody out of there by 9/11 so he can celebrate. And then lastly, don't forget Joe Biden falsely said that special counsel Robert Hur, who was investigating his handling of classified documents, that the special counsel inappropriately brought up Beau as part of his interview in that case, even though the transcript would later reveal that Joe brought up Beau's death like he always does. And then Robert Hur was actually right about the fact that Joe couldn't remember when it happened. So Joe brought it up. What year did my son die? I don't even remember. But how the hell dare he bring that up? That's none of his damn business, says Joe Biden. Except Joe brings it up every opportunity he gets. He never misses an opportunity to talk publicly about the death of Beau, no matter how inappropriate it is. And if someone maybe references it, oh, how the hell dare he? It's none of his business. Now, of course, I don't even have all of the cringe Beau references. I had to cut them down to fit the format. But don't forget that Joe has repeatedly lied about Beau dying in Iraq. And remember, Beau was an Army lawyer. He deployed to Iraq between 2008 and 2009. That's great. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not taking shots at that. But he was diagnosed with brain cancer years later in 2013. He died in 2015. Now, Joe attributes that brain cancer to toxic burn pits in Iraq. Beau was perhaps within the general proximity of them. He wasn't working them directly, but maybe those gave him brain cancer. Now, even if you think Beau's brain cancer is connected to his time in Iraq, personally, I'm not convinced, but it's possible. Beau Biden did not die in Iraq, but Biden has repeatedly claimed that he has. He has said, quote, Beau lost his life in Iraq. He has said, quote, I'm thinking about Iraq because that's where my son died. And these things just aren't true. And remember that Joe Biden is supposedly brought up Beau to the Gold Star families after the Afghanistan withdrawal too. When they're actually receiving the bodies back from Afghanistan, he's meeting with those Gold Star families. This at the airport when they came back from Afghanistan, or on the tarmac. There is no recording of that. The family said, I couldn't believe it, but he brought up Beau a bunch. We're trying to talk about my dead son or daughter, and he's bringing up Beau. There's no recording of that, but it does seem confirmed by Jen Psaki's book, which described the president's experience. Psaki's book reads in part, quote, of all the president's duties, this is high on the list of most heartbreaking. For President Biden in particular, it stirred feelings of his own despair about the death of his son, Joseph Biden III, a.k.a. Beau. And that's why it's kind of hilarious that Joe actually did forget the time of Beau's death in that special counsel interview. That's how you know that he's really gone. He has not shut the hell up about Beau for the last decade, but if he can't remember Beau now, there's really nothing left in that old man brain anymore. But of course, we also have to remember Joe Biden's chief propagandist, Karine Jean-Pierre. Joe had two press secretaries during his term, of course. Jen Psaki, she was only on the job for 16 months. Karine Jean-Pierre was there for most of the Biden term, over 2.5 years, from May 2022 until this week. And so to memorialize Karine Jean-Pierre, we will remember her finest doublespeaks.
Look, independent, mainstream fact checkers in the press and misinformation experts have been calling out cheap fakes. And at the end of the day, they're fakes. That's what they were. The president is clear-eyed, and he is staying in the race.
We have breaking news here. President Biden has announced he will stand down from the race.
It was a selfless act. It wasn't about him. It was about the country.
Will you remember me?
Is there any possibility that the president would end up pardoning his son?
No.
Why doesn't President Biden just pardon him?
I've been very clear. The president's not going to pardon his son. It's still a no. It's still a no.
It will always be a no.
It's still a no. It will be a no. It is a no.
It became a yes.
Circumstances have changed.
Don't let your light.
This is a historic administration. I'm a historic figure, and I certainly walk in history every day, but this is also a historic making administration because of this president.
Now, I don't think it's possible to speak on any president's behalf, but certainly not Biden's, without getting caught in ridiculous hypocrisy and contradiction and having to try to talk your way out of it impossibly. So I can sympathize with the situation a little bit, but then again, nobody forced Karine Jean-Pierre to take this job. Nobody forced her to become maybe the biggest clown in that White House, although she had a lot of competition, but nobody forced her into that absurdity. She willingly took that job. And I'm historic. This White House is historic. I'm historic. Why is she historic? Because she's the first black lesbian to do it.
You sound like a hysterical bleeping snowflake lesbo bleep.
That is what made it historic. Now, my sources say Karine Jean-Pierre has many new career opportunities available to her now that she's moving on. She can make history elsewhere. She can now be the first black lesbian Annie on Broadway. You may be able to get historic first black lesbian Raggedy Ann dolls very soon, or maybe that's Ratchety Ann. I don't know. She could also be the very first black lesbian Ronald McDonald. I think that's an excellent look for her. Or maybe that's the wrong burger chain. Maybe I'm not thinking about this right. She could be part of a new diversity rebranding at Wendy's, except it's now known as Wanda's. It's way more black, way more lesbian. But the point is she has many options. Karine Jean-Pierre, best of luck in all your coming career choices. But maybe Karine Jean-Pierre will have a new romantic interest too. In fact, maybe she's not even a lesbian. Maybe it's just a bit for public credibility. Because did you see the tension between her and Peter Doocy from Fox News during their last exchange this week? Now, they've been adversarial for years, supposedly. Clearly, it's not that hostile, though.
Hi.
Thank you, Karine. If I don't see you again in the briefing, thank you for always. You could have stopped taking the hard questions years ago, and you didn't. So we appreciate that.
Over 2 years, my friend. This is let's say one last dance, right? I don't know how I'm going to fill my dance card now. How will I fill that void without you?
You tell me. You tell me. So
start some rumors in here, I guess.
He's getting red too. Look at him.
Now, I tried to generate some more AI images of their love child, but it couldn't do it. It's too many conflicting phenotypes. I'm typing in I don't know, Peter Doocy with Karine Jean-Pierre's hair, trying to figure it out. It couldn't do it. So I'm sorry I didn't have any entertainment value on that front, but maybe next time. Anyway, a few more items before we get to inauguration and then to the interview, or one more at least. And that's a check-in with one last bit of the Senate confirmation hearings for Trump's nominees. And I guess this is a similar theme of romantic controversies in AI, because on Wednesday I played that AI-generated clip of Senator Mazie Hirono grilling Pete Hegseth about whether he's attracted to obese Hawaiian women who are fully potty trained like Mazie Hirono is. And sometimes you wonder, is the AI actually getting so good that it seems like reality? Or is reality getting so stupid that it seems like AI? And Mazie Hirono is right at the center of that question. To that point, Trump's nominee for Interior Secretary is former North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum. If you don't remember who that is, think the guy with the crazy eyebrows who ran for president for 5 seconds. And Mazie Hirono questioned Doug Burgum. This was before the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee. She questioned him. She opened her questioning by asking him if he's ever committed any type of sexual misconduct or abuse.
As part of my responsibilities to ensure the fitness of nominees before any of the committees on which I sit, I asked the following 2 initial questions. First is, since you became a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
No, Senator, I have not.
Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement related to this kind of conduct?
I have not.
Now, I don't know what's more absurd, opening with that question or pronouncing it harassment. But what are we talking about here? Mr. Burgum, have you ever accidentally grazed a boob in a crowded environment? Or have you ever been grazed by a rogue boob in a crowded environment? There are no accusations of sexual misconduct, sexual abuse, sexual assault, whatever, against Doug Burgum. This is totally out of the blue. It has no basis in reality whatsoever. Now, presumably she's doing this because she's taking an indirect shot at Pete Hegseth, who, of course, she questioned on Monday. But yeah, maybe someday, Mazie, maybe someday someone will accidentally graze your boob in a crowded environment. But I fear it is too late for you.
That's disgusting.
All right. Moving into Inauguration Monday, because tomorrow is the day the greatest political comeback in American history will be completed. Despite the 2020 freest, fairest election of all time, despite the lawfare, despite the assassination attempts, despite all the other desperate measures, Donald Trump will be sworn in tomorrow, assuming all goes to plan. Double knock on wood, of course. Now, the inauguration ceremony, the actual swearing in, that has been moved indoors. It was, typically that's outside on the steps of the Capitol, of course. It's now going to be indoors tomorrow. Trump and officials are citing the weather, that it's just going to be too cold out. He doesn't want people to be hurt or injured or damaged by the cold, and so we're going to move it inside under the Capitol Rotunda. Now, that has happened before. The last time it happened was Ronald Reagan's second inaugural in 1985. Now, my understanding is the decision to move it is entirely the president-elect. So this is Trump and his team's decision. It wasn't forced upon them. There's nobody who tells them they have to do this. Trump put out on Truth Social, I'm doing this for the safety of other people. Of course, you have to wonder how much his own safety is factored into the decision. And at this point with this guy, anything outdoors is risky. So even though I want to see the big event, and I know a lot of people had tickets to a big event, that they went to DC and now the rug's kind of been pulled out from under them. I get it if the reason is safety too. I mean, it makes sense. The show is not as important as, say, not getting shot. So that is a consideration. Now, the inauguration ceremony itself will begin about 11:30 a.m. Eastern tomorrow. Trump's swearing in will be about noon Eastern, somewhere in that range. He will then give his inaugural address. And then Biden and Kamala get the hell out of there with some kind of recognition of their own. And then Trump signs a bunch of stuff, like nominations and executive orders and things like that. And there's an inaugural lunch and a parade down Pennsylvania Avenue to the White House. And of course, everyone's wondering, myself included, is all of this actually going to go to plan? Does somebody else have a different plan? Is somebody else going to intervene? Now we'll find out. I have no credible information to say that that's going to happen or to discuss, other than it just doesn't make sense that the powers that be are just going to let Trump walk right back into the Oval Office unscathed. Tune in tomorrow to find out if that's what happens. But there is one indicator that things might go as planned, though. And that is illegal immigrants are certainly betting they will, or at least many of them are, because many this week are already self-deporting. According to Jorge Ventura reporting for News Nation, he's heard from an immigration lawyer that many of his clients are leaving the country, not just because they're worried about getting deported generally, but they're worried that they're going to get deported to Mexico, even if they're not from Mexico, and they would rather just go back to their home countries instead.
Trump has promised to carry out the largest deportation operation in U.S. history. And before those operations begin, some migrants are already choosing to leave the country voluntarily.
I spoke with immigration attorney Rolando Vasquez, who tells me that some of the immigrants that he represents that entered under the Biden administration are now choosing to return home, fearing deportation under the incoming administration.
Just as recent as yesterday, they notified me that they're going to depart the country voluntarily, and understanding that, the Trump administration is going to carry through on their promises. This is causing for many migrants to leave on their own, knowing that they're either going to be deported to their home country or be deported to Mexico.
In other words, if they leave now, they may still have some control about where they go. If they wait to be deported, they'll lose control. So a lot of them are leaving now. Now, how many are leaving? Unclear, but certainly more than were leaving before, or more than have been leaving in recent years. And earlier in the week, it looked like immigration enforcement was about to get immediately tougher. Now, I'm sure it will in ways, and I'm sure the plans will still be exercised here, but there may be a little bit of a delay. There were plans that were leaked for raids in sanctuary cities like New York and Chicago, set to begin on Tuesday. The Wall Street Journal reported 200 ICE agents were deploying to Chicago alone. On Fox this week, Tom Homan, Trump's border czar, confirmed those plans, or at least implicitly did. But he told the Washington Post yesterday that with those plans leaked, they may actually delay some of that operation. He says leaking the plans puts law enforcement operations at risk. So maybe there'll be some delay here. Even if it's not Tuesday, sounds like it's going to get a lot more serious very soon with immigration enforcement. But I'm a little bit behind, so I got to get to our guest. And I do have a great guest tonight. She wasn't available live, so we pre-recorded this week. But Liz Collin is a reporter at Minnesota's Alpha News. Now, you may know her as the producer of the 2023 documentary, The Fall of Minneapolis, which was all about the death of George Floyd, all the chaos that followed, including the murder trial of Derek Chauvin. And Liz is one of very few reporters who has actually interviewed Derek Chauvin from prison after his conviction. Now, recently, Liz and her company Alpha News, they're facing a defamation lawsuit from the now assistant Minneapolis police chief, Katie Blackwell. Blackwell disputes the claims, or some of the claims made in Collin's book and the documentary, that maybe Katie Blackwell wasn't telling the full truth about whether Minneapolis Police Department or the Minneapolis Police Department trains that restraint technique that Chauvin used on George Floyd or not. But Liz and Alpha News, they do very good work covering stories, not just this story, but stories in Minnesota in general that the rest of the press there just will not. She might be the most knowledgeable source of all things George Floyd and Derek Chauvin out there. So the segment is just under a half hour, and I'll be back and get to your super chats after that. I will see you on the other side.
I've seen of the videotape, the photograph, and the police training manual, they look pretty identical.
Were you trained in MRT, the maximal restraint technique?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. All the police officers were trained in the MRT.
This call is from a federal prison.
Hi, Derek, it's Liz.
Welcome back. My guest tonight is Alpha News reporter Liz Collin. Liz was the executive producer on the 2023 documentary The Fall of Minneapolis, all about the death of George Floyd and the aftermath. She's also the author of They're Lying, The Media, the Left, and the Death of George Floyd. Liz, thank you for making time for me.
Appreciate you having me on. Thank you, and thank you for the clip you posted recently about the lawsuit, and you do great work. Happy to be here to talk about it.
Well, I appreciate it, and thank you. I admire your work as well, and I want to talk about that defamation lawsuit that was filed against you and Alpha News from the assistant police chief over the documentary. But before we get to that, can you just give me a sense of your journalistic background? How did you get to this point?
Yeah, sure thing. I'm a Minnesota native, so grew up in this state, watching the television station that I eventually landed, what I considered the dream job back home, right, at the station that I grew up watching. But I've lived all across the country as an anchor and reporter, sort of moving up market sizes. And I was the weekend anchor at our CBS affiliate in Minneapolis here, WCCO. For nearly 15 years. I was an investigative reporter there as well, and really saw my professional and my personal life change after the events of May 25th, 2020. Not a story I ever set out to tell, but I was so appalled as a journalist that it seemed no one was willing to tell it.
So the George Floyd event itself, the death of George Floyd, caused a change in your career trajectory. That's what actually caused you to move away from legacy media into your position at Alpha News?
Yeah, that's right. I am married to a longtime former, now he's retired, Minneapolis police lieutenant who was serving as the union president at the time, Lieutenant Bob Kroll. And he was canceled, I was canceled, kind of a lot of families connected to law enforcement. They were all canceled back then. It seems crazy, right? You know, here we are years later having this conversation, but that was really what was happening. But I was documenting everything that took place and how the media was reporting, you know, what happened, and was really appalled at what they were not sharing with the public. But yeah, I left mainstream media, joined independent media over here at Alpha News. They allowed me to put out my book, They're Lying. The media, the left, and the death of George Floyd. That eventually led then to the fall of Minneapolis, the documentary that's been out for a little bit over a year at this point.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about how the documentary came to be. Just how, when did you get the idea? How did the production go? Just give me a sense of how the creation of the film went.
You know, the book for me, I'd never done a book before, but I thought if I can just put this, you know, in one spot where everybody can get the information, I just think that the world would really be different if we were presented with the facts. The book kind of took off. It was a self-published book. I work with Dr. J.C. Shea, who's an incredible editor, a former police officer also. And he believed in this project from the beginning, but it was just, we were ready to kind of move on after the book. But amazingly, the book, I think, gave people courage to come forward for the fall of Minneapolis. We heard so many news stories, cops who were there, the officers in prison were willing to speak out, the families of these officers. And we thought, you know, let's try to put this together. We wanted to offer it for free, so as many people would see it as possible. So we did some crowdfunding to put the documentary together. I think it's about more than 10 million people at this point that have seen their 10 million views we've recorded on the fall of Minneapolis. And people are really appalled, as they should be, you know, from these lies that were peddled, you know, almost from hour one. That changed the trajectory not only of the city of Minneapolis, but places all across the country, and policing as well. I've yet to find someone who actually thinks, you know, we're better off now than we were back then. And we called it the fall of Minneapolis for a reason, because it really did change so many things, everything in a sense, in that city.
Yeah, it's a great documentary. When it came out, it was family viewing around here. You know, we all gathered around and watched what looks like the destruction of, you know, where my family is from. So it was kind of it was very informative, obviously, and very important. But man, it was upsetting to watch at the same time. And if people haven't seen it, I would very much recommend it. Again, you can check it out for free. thefallofminneapolis.com, hosted on Rumble, I believe. But
yeah, you can find it on Rumble or YouTube as well. We kind of have it everywhere we possibly can. It's pretty easy to find.
Well, you mentioned the lies that were a part of the narrative of everything that happened with George Floyd and Derek Chauvin. One of those, and I'll be careful since now there's a lawsuit pending, one of those potential mistruths that was said at the trial came from Katie Blackwell, who is now the assistant police chief. At the time, she was a police inspector. And she said on the stand something to the effect of, I don't know what restraint technique Derek Chauvin was using against George Floyd, because we don't train that at the Minneapolis Police Department. And since you and other personalities at Alpha News, as part of the book and as part of the documentary, said various versions of she was not telling the truth when she said that, she has now brought a defamation lawsuit against Alpha News and you personally, among others. So what is the nature of this lawsuit, and how did this come to be?
Yeah, so it's interesting. We were served with this lawsuit at the end of October, is when we were served with this defamation suit, myself, Dr. Shea, and Alpha News. Again, we used Katie Blackwell in her own words, her public testimony for about 30 seconds in the fall of Minneapolis. Certainly, we were surprised by this lawsuit. Our attorney referred to it as trash, and garbage belongs in the trash. Those were his words. But also we knew that this could open things up even a bit more and give us more of an opportunity to get the truth out there. And I think we've been able to see just exactly how that has unfolded just these last couple of weeks. So we're served with this defamation suit, Katie Blackwell alleging that this documentary has clouded her career, despite the fact she was promoted actually twice since the book and the documentary. And what's interesting, even in our word choice in the book, we said it seemed like she could have been lying, or it seemed that she wasn't familiar with training. And then you can hear the fall of Minneapolis. People are talking about their almost visceral reaction to her testimony during Derek Chauvin's trial that took place in 2021. But now, as part of this lawsuit, we have sworn declarations from dozens of officers, 34 officers in all, former and a current officer who was brave enough to come forward. 14 of them have gone so far to say that Katie Blackwell committed perjury. They believe that she perjured herself on the stand in Chauvin's criminal trial. 34 of them are 100% on board. We were trained in this knee on neck restraint. So for her to say she doesn't recognize this technique, or to say this is not how they trained, which were her words, in the actual trial itself, they've now sworn under oath, their names to all of this, and this was part of our motion to dismiss, that these documents were submitted to the Hennepin County Court. So it'll be kind of months before this all pans out on the defamation front. But I was also able to confront Katie Blackwell, to ask her about this. Did she lie in Chauvin's trial? Is she aware that these officers have come forward? She didn't have much to say, but this really has put her in the spotlight now due to these declarations and what's contained in our motion to dismiss that was just filed.
Yeah, I'm no lawyer, and I kind of casually watch courtroom developments. I don't know that I've ever seen a lawsuit blow up on someone quite this badly. And that'll happen if you take on the truth as your enemy, as I believe personally, not speaking on your behalf, but I believe personally she has done. It's not just that we have we have sworn statements from these former police officers and one current, as you mentioned. We've got photos that were submitted as part of this motion to dismiss of various training programs within the Minneapolis Police Department using what they call the maximal restraint technique, which Derek Chauvin also used. But just personally, the emergence of this photo of her handling someone during the University of Minnesota hockey riots in 2014, using what appears to be the maximal restraint technique. And I just don't know how to interpret this. And I don't want to go too far because pending litigation, you may have to be careful. You tell me. But I think she knows that what she's saying is at odds with the truth, and she's proceeding with this anyway. And to me, that it makes me wonder if there's some kind of ulterior motive. Is this just to try to take down Alpha News? It seems so. I can't explain this move that I have a hard time interpreting it.
I think you're asking the same questions that we have been since the beginning here too, Matt. But what's interesting is we've pointed out the political connections to the law firm that is representing Assistant Police Chief Katie Blackwell and Keith Ellison, our Attorney General, who was responsible for the prosecution of these 4 police officers. The owner of this law firm is good friends of Keith Ellison. That's documented on social media. And also there are connections to Ilhan Omar, our congresswoman from Minnesota as well. So Alpha News has been trying to expose some of the political connections here because, of course, the mainstream or the corporate media in town will never talk about those things. But I agree. I think that this is a bit of a head scratcher. And also really amazing that so many of these officers were willing to come forward. And I will say, even since these filings, there's been so many more willing to come forward as well. People who were actually attended training with her, people who supervised her before. They're willing to speak up, and many officers on the job said that they would be willing to as well, but they know how the Minneapolis Police Department works, and they would, suffer some, consequences on the job, but they were willing to do so, anonymously. But I think it'll be interesting what the judge decides here. But again, it will probably drag out for at least a few more months at this point. And, there could even be a trial if it goes that far.
Yeah. You mentioned your lawyers are calling it trash. Her lawsuit, that is. That signals to me that they're pretty confident in your defense. And based on my understanding of this case, it's not even a First Amendment issue necessarily. Truth is a defense against any defamation claim. And it seems to me that everything you guys said was true, not just because you say so, but because we can look at evidence. What do your lawyers think about their likelihood of succeeding in getting this dismissed, or if this did go to trial, winning a trial?
Yeah, I think they feel very, very confident. They've kind of talked about how they've never submitted, the stack was really quite impressive, everything that went into the court. It's 113 pages, just the brief alone, but then we have these 34 declarations. We also have declarations from Minnesota lawmakers, members of Congress who have come forward to say this is really also a matter of protecting the First Amendment, protecting the media. This is important as well, just because, perhaps you don't like the speech of someone, you don't get to just shut them down and sue them. That's not how it works. And we have actually a very good law in Minnesota, an anti-slap or a slap law that would prevent filing things like this against media organizations. So it really will be interesting how this all shakes out. But I will say also the attorneys here, I think, would love to depose some of these people because that could perhaps be even more telling. But it will be this motion for dismissal that the judge will first have to rule on, and then we'll just decide, where we go from there.
I saw the clip that you mentioned where you had gone down to the police department and confronted Katie Blackwell to try to get answers to some of the questions that we're discussing about this lawsuit. But prior to the filing of the lawsuit, did she ever reach out to you guys to try to resolve some of this? Had you ever spoken to her personally, or were you just slapped with this suit and it was a surprise?
Yeah, that's what's interesting is, I know quite a few members of the Minneapolis Police Department, it being my husband's job for so long, but she's not one that I knew, never had met her at all. And also in the documentary, she plays such a small role. She, compared to many other people who the interview subjects, went after, quite openly during the documentary. So yes, there was definitely a surprise here, and no, she never reached out for a retraction or anything along those lines. And in fact, as is mentioned in the brief itself, her attorneys did not file this under the statute of limitations, which is a 2-year time period for the book. That it was filed after the statute of limitations, was up already. So I think there's a lot of things that the judge is going to look at here and go, what exactly,
So that hasn't been ruled on. They're just trying to include what was said in the book, and the judge has not made any determination on that.
Right. Their side here has a couple more weeks to come back to this initial filing. They could also ask for an extension because we did give them quite a bit to go through. And then as of right now, we have a date in February to go ahead and, it's a court date to basically argue for this to be dismissed.
And if it's statute of limitations, I can't imagine the judge has much discretion on that. It's either outside of it or it's inside of it. That would be another. Right. It'd be another element of this suit that I find baffling on its face. But okay, I guess they're going to keep trying it. I want to discuss your interviews with Derek Chauvin as well. You might be the only reporter who has actually spoken with Derek Chauvin since his conviction. Is that correct, or are there others?
As far as I know, he has been in touch with a couple others that I don't think have actually used. It's quite the process, I'll be quite honest, to go through with these interviews. Amazing how many problems sometimes you can have on the phone or a disconnection or whatnot.
I was going to ask you for his phone number. I'd like to send him a text and see if we can be friends.
It's not an easy process at all. But also just something that has happened recently. Alex Kueng, he's the officer on the job for just 3 days. was just recently let out of prison and has served his sentence. He still has a probationary period. But that has happened as well. If you head to the fallofminneapolis.com and the news section there, we have all kinds of stories where we keep up to date. And you're right, though, we are in pretty continuous conversations with Derek Chauvin and his attorney. As you know, there's an appeal, a state and a federal appeal that they're working on currently.
Yeah, and I obviously you had interviewed Derek Chauvin as part of the documentary, which was a major piece of it. I didn't realize that you had interviewed him fairly recently, as it looks like back in November, about what's going on with his move in federal prison as a result of him getting stabbed in, 2023 that happened. But just give me a sense of Derek Chauvin's state of mind. Obviously, he's got these appeals going on. He's got some movement on the federal level with regard to what he says was ineffective counsel and the consideration of a different medical opinion about how George Floyd died. But the fact that he's appealing implies maybe some spirit or optimism within him. But what's his mindset? What is he thinking these days?
Yeah, it was actually just about 8 days after we released The Fall of Minneapolis that Derek was stabbed 22 times in prison. Just a horrifying day that happened the day after Thanksgiving, right after the documentary is released. He's stabbed by a former FBI informant. There are still so many questions about all of that. John Turskak, he's basically supposed to go on trial soon here, but it's now been moved 4 different times, so many postponements there. But I will say that Derek actually sounds, when we do speak to him, really more resolved than ever before. A federal appeal, as you mentioned, is ongoing. He kind of got what you would consider the first win in court, that they are now going to allow some testing that his team said should have been done from the beginning. He wasn't aware of, and that is a paraganglioma that George Floyd had, this tumor that could lead to sudden cardiac death that was not tested during his initial autopsy by Dr. Andrew Baker, the Hennepin County medical examiner. So a judge ruled in his favor just recently there. And there is this ongoing state appeal. And I've been in touch with his attorney. He has a new attorney at this point, and he called these court filings, related to our case. He called them a very significant development, and he will be using them as well as he is putting together the appeal for Derek's state sentence. So I think that a lot is happening and happening rather quickly, just these last couple months, but it really does seem like Derek has some hope for the first time in quite a long time.
Yeah, I really appreciate your work in talking to him. Like I said, you're one of the few who have, and other than his defense in court, we just haven't heard his side of the story a lot. And it's very much appreciated that you're doing the hard work to make that available. Even if people have criticism, skepticism, doubts about Derek Chauvin, to give him that opportunity to at least have his voice heard, I think is very valuable. So thank you for that.
And it really is amazing to me as a journalist that it seems no one even wanted to talk to him from the very beginning. And that's the same as these other officers. They didn't actually even seem to care what the real truth was or what they were actually doing. It's why the body cameras, were hidden in this case. And so much of this happened, behind closed doors. And their fates were sealed very early on. In fact, I just talked to Alex Kueng's mom. As I mentioned, he got out of prison. And she said that her son, who was 26 years old, his third day on the job as a Minneapolis police officer, and his fate was decided within 12 hours.
Can you remind me what his role was? Because he wasn't the initial confrontation of George Floyd, right? And obviously he's not Derek Chauvin doing the restraint that is associated with the death. But what exactly was Kueng's role in that? It was a group of 4, right?
Yeah, actually, Alex Kueng is the one who arrests George Floyd, the black police officer who arrests George Floyd that it seems no one wants to talk about, right? Instead, we're fed this is the most racist, police interaction in U.S. history. And of course, that didn't line up with what actually happened, and the officers who were actually there, half of them, are non-white. Tu Tao, who still has about a year left on his sentence, he's still in prison. But you have you have Alex Kueng and Thomas Lane approach the vehicle where George Floyd is after that $20 counterfeit bill is allegedly passed at Cup Foods in Minneapolis at 38th and Chicago. And right away, you can tell that George Floyd is agitated. He's saying a lot of things, refusing to comply with the officers. And this interaction drags on for a really long time. And Alex Kueng is actually the one who, arrests George Floyd that day. Thomas Lane is the one that mentions the MRT during the fact that George Floyd himself asks to be laid on the ground. George Floyd himself says he can't breathe before Derek Chauvin is even on scene.
Yeah.
And Lane is calling for an ambulance within 36 seconds of them putting Floyd on the ground, recognizing that something medically is not going well for Floyd.
Do you know if that was Alex Kueng's first career arrest? If he was 3 days on the job, how many arrests was he making?
Well, the way it works in Minneapolis, he was an FTO officer for quite some time, as part of field training. So he had, been a part of this before, but this is his third day off field training to even be, alone with another police officer, Thomas Lane, in that instance. So he was very, very new to the job, and his story is really incredible. Here's a guy who joined the department, who was kind of the top of his class. In fact, you can even see in the fall of Minneapolis how emotional one of his trainers is talking about Alex, because he was such a standout. I mean, Tim Hanks talks about how he's trained thousands of cadets in his time in Minneapolis. This was nearly a 900 police officer strong department at the time. And Alex stood out as the top 2 or 3. He joined the Minneapolis Police Department, wanting to help, change the culture. He was one of 80 black officers at the time. His mom is a longtime Minneapolis educator, and none of that mattered. The chief of police never even had a conversation with any of the cops after that interaction, and none of their families either. So many people turn their backs on these officers, and in so many ways turn their backs on the entire city in the process.
Well, in closing, of course, you have covered the fall of Minneapolis, but you're well connected with the police department. I'm sure you're well connected with the general political mindset of people there. Do you see reason for optimism for the rise of Minneapolis again, or have we not yet reached the bottom? What do you think?
I always wish that I have better news to end these on.
I tried to set you up, but all right.
Yeah. It's actually the city council in Minneapolis went even further left after this. There really are self-proclaimed socialists that are on the city council at this point. Many people have moved out of the city. Businesses really have fled. Parts of the city are almost just unrecognizable. But the city had nearly 900 police officers, as I mentioned. That number is down to about 500 at this point. They're now under both a federal and state consent decree in Minneapolis, making proactive policing even more difficult. I think with a new year here, I am optimistic. And so many people, I think, have cared about the truth here. And I also think that's why journalism is still so important, to not be fearful of these stories. Sure, I have a few haters out there, no doubt about that. But I think it really has helped to open so many eyes, and hopefully something like this doesn't happen again. And we're just told the truth from the start.
Plus, Tim Walz is back in town. So, you got obstacles all over. I'm just kidding. But, Godspeed with that as well. Anyway, that's my guest, Liz Collin. You can find her work with Alpha News at alphanews.org. You can follow her on X. That's at Liz Collin. Stream her documentary, The Fall of Minneapolis. That's at thefallofminneapolis.com. Liz, is there anywhere else you'd like to direct people to find your work?
Yeah, if you head over to alphanews.org, we are pretty much a Minnesota-based news organization, but a lot of stories here, a lot of lessons to be learned by following Minnesota news and some of our politicians. So I appreciate the time. Thank you so much for your work, and hope to talk to you again, Matt.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks again to my guest, Liz Collin. Find her and Alpha News at alphanews.org. Find her documentary, The Fall of Minneapolis, at thefallofminneapolis.com. Linked in the description for your convenience. Documentary is free to watch. Well worth your time. Highly recommended. Before I take a super chat break here, I did want to revisit something that she mentioned during the interview that I actually was not aware of this week, and it is worthy of highlighting. I tend to forget in that incident, it actually involved 4 police officers, all of whom went to prison. Now, Derek Chauvin is still in prison. Derek Chauvin got the longest sentence. But there were many, many lives impacted by what I think are things that seem like lies, Katie Blackwell. But yeah, Liz mentioned that Alexander Kueng was released from federal prison on Wednesday. He got out of prison in Ohio, and he pled guilty in 2022 to aiding and abetting second-degree manslaughter. That, of course, being the actions of the alleged actions of Derek Chauvin. And he was sentenced to 3.5 years. The aiding and abetting charge there, that was actually the state charge in Minnesota. Merrick Garland's DOJ got him on depriving George Floyd of civil rights. And so he was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison in that case, too. That's why he was in federal prison in Ohio. And he served those sentences concurrently, and now he's out. And as Liz mentioned, this guy was highly praised as a Minneapolis Police Department recruit, leading to his entry into that job. And of course, as she mentions, third day on the job. What luck, rookie. You get to arrest George Floyd. That's a rough draw. My gosh. But okay, so Kueng is out now. Thomas Lane is the guy who made that initial approach on the car that George Floyd was in. If you watch the body cam footage, that's Thomas Lane, the first portion of the body cam footage. He made the initial approach on the car. He was released in August. To Tao, who did some of the crowd control during that incident, he is scheduled for release in November. And of course, Derek Chauvin is still in federal prison for the next 2 decades, or at least almost that much. Though, as discussed, he is pursuing several options for appeal. But before I get into Super Chat, and we thank Liz for all her information and her time, of course. I hope we get to chat again. I really appreciated it. But before I get into the rest of the news, I got to find Knuckle Hunky Buck to take some of your Super Chats. So please stand by.
Stand back and stand by.
Knock, knock. Who's there? Knuckles.
And now it's time for Super Chats with Knuckle Hunky Buck.
I'm a knucklehead at times.
Hello, sir.
Mr. Christiansen, how are you doing?
I'm all right. Is that the right mic? It sounds a little funny. Tap it. Yeah, I think
You
it's
hear
picking up. It's picking up something else. I can hear you, but it sounds like a webcam or something.
Okay, let me. It probably did just switch over for. Yeah, it did switch over to my webcam.
Well,
Okay,
good job testing your tech.
I did, and then all of a sudden it gave me the. Did it change over now?
Yeah, it's good now.
Okay. Yeah, sorry about that. I don't know why it went to the.
Sorry, what I meant was thank you for
screen.
contributing to the duct tape production. I appreciate your contribution.
Oh, and I before we get started, I wanted to apologize. I was completely planning on joining for the hangout tonight, and my dumbass didn't even regard the fact that you had the time posted in Eastern time.
Oh,
so I showed up at the end of the party and I was ready to go, and
that's all right. We had a great party without you. It's no big deal.
It's usually the case.
All right, over on YouTube and Tippy, Injured Guardian says 1883 pilot rant. Oh, so this is 1883 as in the Yellowstone spinoff. God, it's hard for me to remember the first episode, but James should have stripped the four bandits of all. So this is J.D. Dutton, right? The what's the term? Like the patriarch of the Dutton family. Is that the correct use of the word? Like the initial dad of the Duttons.
Yeah. You like the big dad, the guy who's the head of the family.
So
but
JD,
I haven't gotten into Yellowstone at all.
Well, I loved the show. I know that I didn't love the final season. I'll leave it at that in the interest of time, in the interest of not spoiling. But if you do get into the show, you give it even if you watch like some of the first season and you like it, 1883 is a fantastic production. Really, really good. So highly recommended. But okay, so in 1883, the pilot episode, James should have stripped the four bandits of all food, water, money, gear, and horses, kept what he could use, and sold the rest. Every war vet back then would have done so without hesitation. I can't remember exactly what happened, so forgive me. But yeah, he must have been. I know that he was a Confederate a guy. He was in the Confederate Army and he was captured and then he was released. Was he ambushed? I can't remember exactly what happened to J.D. Dutton, so you'll have to forgive me. But I would encourage you to continue with the show even if you didn't like that premise, because it's very, very good. Also says that oversight is becoming more common in TV. The Bass Reeves pilot especially. The Game of Thrones Season 7, Episode 5, Spartacus 113, Deadwood 106. The writers should read about Louis L'Amour novels and the Odyssey. Do you know how to pronounce that? You good with French?
I presume it's Louis L'Amour.
Okay, we'll go with that.
And now, do you have any over on Rumble? I'm not showing any over
on
Rumble.
I do, yeah, but maybe there's like a mismatch. I just have a couple, yeah. So we'll get to those when we're done with YouTube.
Zero.
And TV. Maybe the plugin is not operating correctly or something.
Okay. Anyways, I've got Jimny over on Tippy. G'day fag, 3 a.m, but it means I can throw you shekels before bed. Stay black, brother. Don't be gay.
First of all, wait.
We love you. You're very special.
Thank you, Jimny. But you have earned. Are you thinking you've earned the right to say the F slur on this show? Is that what I just heard?
I'm just reading super chats.
All right. Hey, it's his word, not mine. All right. Thank you, Jimny. Bold. I like that.
It's 2025. It's 2025, Matt.
Well, we need to take some words back.
It's time.
That's for sure.
It's time.
Yeah. Long Dong John, Daniel Penny embodies the fact that sometimes a man has to do a little more than what's expected of him. That's right. I bet Daniel Penny uses Hero Timberline soap because after all, sometimes a man has to do a little more than what's expected of him, per my music guy, Chris Card, who made the excellent Hero soap ad. I know that's a joke, but it is actually true. You know, I wonder, there's the Derek Chauvin situation that we just discussed, but imagine you're on that train watching people being threatened and abused by this crazy, drugged out of his mind bum. I would like to think that I would have the bravery to intervene like Daniel Penny did, but you don't know if that guy has a knife. You don't know how crazy he is. You don't know what he's going to do. I don't know what I hope that I would have the bravery that he displayed, but I think it's in all the villainization of him. Of course, it's very under discussed how brave that guy actually was.
No, he's a hero and he has every right to walk tall and he should be proud. He should be proud.
Agreed.
All right. And I've got Injured Guardian. Neil's censorship sucks. However, Rumble won't let me update my credit card, and Odyssey says I need more subscribers to join there. Therefore, I'm stuck with Neil. By the way, do you listen to audiobooks? Injured Guardian, pro tip, Tippy Stream. They'll let you get away with typing anything you want.
I mean,
anything.
All the ends you want. Any of them.
And you choose your username each time you enter a chat.
That's true. Yeah, the custom username.
I'm not gonna show how all the sausage is made, but there's a couple of characters who have appeared on the stream and super chats who
Thank you for your contribution. All right, Injured Guardian. Yeah, if there's anything I can do, that sounds like stuff that's on the platforms. Unfortunately, I wish I could help out with that, but I can say that Tibby Stream does function better than some of them, and doesn't seem to censor very much as far as I've seen. And if I can answer any questions about that stuff, let me know. Oh, and you did have a question about audiobooks. I don't commonly listen to audiobooks, though sometimes. In fact, I don't do a lot of recreational reading or book listening in that way, just because I read a lot for what I do for my own production. So I don't necessarily have an appetite to read recreationally with my free time. But the last audiobook I listened to was Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. And that was a couple of years ago. And I went into it looking for a connection between the teachings of Jesus and moral origins. And I'm not saying it didn't have anything to say about that, but it's not necessarily what I found. I found a bunch of value otherwise, especially its commentary on the nature of men and women and marriage. And highly recommended Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. It was a great listen when I was out on a very long walk/hike a few years ago. You ever read it or listened to it?
No.
Recommended.
Okay. I went through a bit of a book phase in my 20s, just reading kind of classics like 1984, Brave New World, Clockwork Orange. There's a handful of books that I read. I got into Chuck Palahniuk a bit, but I haven't read a ton of books. Mostly
I'm shocked to hear that. Now you're pretty clever. You're pretty wordy. I shouldn't take shots. That's
No, you should take shots.
You got that vocabulary.
That's what I'm here for. That's what I'm here for.
I suppose. All right. That's why we're all here, I guess.
Yeah. Anyway, I got Esoterica Unbound. Biden's career is an almost perfect avatar for the half-century descent of the Dems from mere corruption into demented, spiteful, and stupid corruption. Stoker got wrong. This is how vampires actually die.
Yeah, maybe. There's got to be some explanation for what we've just watched. I can't say enough about the metaphor of him falling up the stairs. I know I've talked that to death, but it's just the ability of this man to fail upward. I know to a large extent that's what a lot of government personnel do, especially in the federal government. But nobody has failed upward with more excellence in ascent than Joe Biden. The man is the master of it.
And it's fascinating to actually see it physically happen.
Yes, God wanted everyone to watch it in motion in that way.
Yeah.
Long Dong John says, I can't believe that's a bit gay, man, didn't make the cut for the montages. Well,
that's a big game, man.
Dude, there could have. I'm not even kidding. Was it you who said last week this? Was
could
it
have been
Long
a
Dong
full
John
2 hours?
Yeah, like a 3-hour production.
Yeah, it could have been the whole thing. Could have been the whole
It's
thing.
actually not an exaggeration. If I sat down and put together every possible clip, I wouldn't be surprised if it ended up being 3 hours. And that's kind of why I went more focused with it to try to think of the things that were the most consequential. But that's the thing with Joe Biden. There's so many classics that aren't really consequential, but are hilarious.
That's a big game, man.
That was him talking to the women's soccer team. I think Megan Rapinoe was involved. And he was saying, that's a big game, man. But because it's Joe Biden stammering and stumbling, it sounds exactly like that's a bit gay, man.
I like that you did include a little snippet from the Dark Brandon with the red lights with the really fascist looking background.
That was a classic moment too.
That was a nice touch.
And I went through that because I wasn't going to use a piece of the speech, but just the imagery. There was one moment where he did that Hitlery gesture like this, that double fist, almost bicep flex move. And I couldn't find it. I don't know where it is in the speech, so I just gave up. Dude, yesterday ended up being a longer day than expected for reasons totally independent of my workload. So I didn't start on this stuff until late, but because there were so many clips and things to organize, I know it sounds preposterous, but I was doing I Will Remember You montages in the intro of this show until 1:30 last night. That's how thoughtful I tried to be with it, okay? And I know everybody's going to look at it and think, wow, it took you till 1:30 a.m. to produce that crap? Yes, it did, and I'm very proud of it. But that's how many... There's just such a long list of things. It was like, I got to go to bed, man. I can't get through all these.
And speaking of your I Will Remember You montages, quick little shout out to Karine Jean-Pierre. I will remember you. Total NILF.
What? NILF? I think you mean BLILF. Black lesbian, I'd like to. Stunning and brave
NILF.
black lesbian.
I chose the word I chose.
Oh my God, bro.
Nice lady, I'd like to. Come on. Holy crap. Okay. Esoterica, who's up? Am I up or are you up? I think you're up, actually.
I don't even remember. I'll go with, well, since I don't have any on Rumble, I'll just take the last one on YouTube. Esoterica Unbound. Seems unlikely Antifa will cause much trouble this week as their pansies and DNC temps are expected to remain sub-freezing for the next 5 days. It's getting hard to deny the role of divine intervention in Trump season 3.
Maybe that is it. Maybe that's what I'm not factoring, because I keep expecting the other shoe to drop. I am terrified. Maybe that's too exaggerated of a word, but there's a piece of my mind that can't get over the worry of turning on the news tomorrow and it's going to be something horrible. Like, oh man, look at what didn't happen, and now they're actually, or look at what happened, and there isn't an inauguration. Again, knock on wood. I don't know what that would be. I don't want any of those things to happen. But maybe what I'm not considering in that worry or that fear is, hey, if you believe in concepts like divine intervention, like God looking out for people, like God having a plan or a course of action, Donald Trump appears to be a man of destiny. And maybe that's all we're seeing here is the destiny realized, and there's nothing to worry about.
Well, and I've kind of been thinking about that myself lately. Why hasn't there been a huge reaction to the election? And I'm kind of going back to a conversation I had with my sister, who does actually vote blue. And it was a conversation that happened like the week after Trump got shot in the ear. And like, I think just Democrats kind of accepted once he stood up and started pumping his fist and yelling, fight, fight, fight. He won the election. They knew he won the election.
You got nothing. You can't match that.
And they couldn't backlash against that moment or something. And they couldn't have a freak out about him winning the election then. And they knew it was a foregone conclusion. And so maybe there's a certain amount of actual just acceptance where it's not like shock and denial and stuff like that. They just got to come to terms with it before it actually happened.
Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe they're much farther along in the stages of grief than I realize. They're already at acceptance, and I'm thinking they're at whatever the early stages are, the freak out stages.
But we'll see what's coming in the next 4 years, I guess.
There's going to be plenty. Thank you, Esoterica Unbound. Appreciate it. Let me hop over to Rumble. I've just got a couple over there. Of course, iBot is
Lbot.
Thank God, dude.
I am not going to be niggardly.
Thank you for sticking up for Lbot, because I always forget, and that is totally inappropriate given Lbot's support for the show.
That's why you have me here, and that's why you need to keep me here.
Okay.
I will always get Lbot's name right.
All right. It's not time for contract negotiations. Calm down. Yakko says, I know TikTok is a CCP spy app, and I refuse to use it for that reason. I don't need or want the government to have the power to ban websites. If they can ban TikTok, they can also ban other websites like Rumble. Well, technically Rumble is foreign owned, right? Or at least it was. It was a Canadian operation. I guess they're not considered a foreign adversary, although it depends who you ask, because I do think Canada does some awfully adversarial things at times. But of course, technically and formally, they're not an adversary of ours. But I'll get into the TikTok stuff in just a moment. But I'm like you. I don't personally give a crap about TikTok. That's not for me. Are you a TikTok guy?
No, actually, I kind of like, I'm split on this. On principle, I strictly think that you can't get rid of an app, you can't get rid of a speech platform, but then like I'm in my 40s, and so like I'm kind of getting the like, oh, TikTok is garbage and get rid of it or whatever. But like, I don't know. Like if it's like actually primarily used for Chinese spying, maybe kind of, but it's a speech platform, and so like
I'll get into it in a minute. Like on principle, I don't necessarily have a problem with restricting foreign access to our markets. But the way that this has been handled, I have a lot of questions about, because it seems like only in this context do we care about Chinese infiltration. But if the Chinese want to infiltrate our country in any number of other ways, that's fine.
Yeah, they want to send a honeypot over who's going to bang a like congressman or whatever. That's
yeah. All right. Link to the Future says, watching you and Allison Morrow last week, I was thinking this girl has a good head on her shoulders. She would make a great co-host of a weekly live show if someone was looking. Well, I'm glad you like Allison. I think she does great work. And of course, she will have, she's welcome back here. She will be a regular contributor. I don't know what the future holds. Like I said, I'm not really looking for like a permanent co-host type thing, though. Things develop and change over time. I also know that Allison has, doing this show at this time would be very difficult for her. So, it's not in the cards, practically speaking, for now. But Allison will have a place to drop by over here from time to time. And I think she does great work. And so I'm happy to have her. But all right, I think I'm caught. Oh, wait, I have one more thing one more thing over on, or a couple more things. D-Live, Grandmaster B, and Polecats, thank you guys for supporting the show. Odyssey Blanket says, let's see. Matt, do you think Orange Man, why do you think he removed Vivek from his team? Well, I haven't seen that he removed Vivek from anything, because isn't Vivek still doing the Doge thing, or is he out on that? Do you know?
I haven't really followed Vivek at all. No.
The only Vivek news number one, he was all about the H-1B visa debate over Christmas, and then he just like disappeared. So I don't know. I don't know what happened with that. But I've seen news that he's supposedly running for Ohio governor now. So maybe that's why he's developing some sort of Ohio gubernatorial campaign, I guess. But that's the only information that I have.
Kind of unrelated, but did you watch one of Bering's most recent ones about what's his name, Pierre?
God, I looked it up when I was talking about I had it committed to memory. It's I think it's Polyev. Yeah, Polyev.
Like eating an apple and like getting like interviewed by a reporter who's trying to accuse him of like taking a page from Trump's book. And
that one's
like,
classic.
What page? I had never seen that until until Bering did it.
It's maybe a year or two old. It's older, but yeah, I haven't seen Bering talk about it. Speaking of people I'd like to have on the stream, I got to connect with Bering because it's been a very long time.
I never thought that I would be a fan of a guy named Pierre Polyev, but
he is French. Beware.
He won me over just eating an apple and talking to some asshole reporter.
Blankets also says, do you think it's more of a positive or a negative that TikTok was banned and then restored? I'm going to get into that in just a minute. Blankets also asks, says there are some base channels out there on TikTok. I'm thinking it's a positive that TikTok is back. I will get to that momentarily. And didn't Orange Man say that he was negotiating with TikTok and that's why it was restored? Maybe TikTok will become an American company. Well, yeah, as I'll get to, Trump is now saying he wants some sort of joint venture between, he said the U.S. and ByteDance. I don't think he means the U.S. government. I think he means a U.S. company. But yeah, the whole thing is a strange mess. So actually, I'm going to get into it pretty much right now. But did you have anything you would like to offer before you're out of here, Mr. Hunkybuck?
Yeah, no, you were just saying that people are saying they can't name a single Biden accomplishment. But we have to be fair. We have to give credit where credit is due. He did make a campaign promise that he did deliver on. He did lead an effective strategy to mobilize true international depression.
Fair enough. All right.
Get the hell out of here.
See you next time.
All right. Have a good one.
I'm a knucklehead at times.
There he goes, our friend Knuckle Hunkybuck. We appreciate his participation in Super Chat. All right. And Before we're finished up, I got to get into the rest of the big news this week, which includes, yes, the momentary ban of TikTok, and then it was restored. So what was this, like 15 hours without TikTok, the great experiment? Something like that. Must have been a very confusing weekend for TikTok users. I am not one. But yeah, sometime yesterday, TikTok was banned or went dark in the United States. If you tried to use it in the US, you get this message that it's unavailable due to federal regulation. It was actually removed from the app stores as well, Android, iPhone, etc. And then sometime this morning, TikTok came back online. I believe it's back online right now. But the company was citing reassurances from Trump that they're going to work something out to keep the platform operational here in the US. So, what is going on here? Well, let's go back to last spring. Congress passes this law to force TikTok and its parent company ByteDance, but them in particular, but also if you read the bill, any company deemed to be run by a foreign adversary or a foreign security threat, they have to sell the company to an American operator to operate in this country or be banned from the country. That's essentially what the bill said. And the concerns about the app, at least ostensibly, this is what we're being told, primarily that the Chinese and the Chinese Communist Party, they're harvesting Americans' data. They're spying on us. The national security threats associated with the use of TikTok. TikTok is essentially Chinese spyware. That's the worry. And that's why we have to get it in the hands of American operation or get it out of our country. And then after that bill passed, again, last spring, early summer, whenever that was, nothing really serious happened for the rest of the year. And that, as far as I understand, that's mostly because ByteDance, again, the parent company, they wanted to challenge that new law in court instead of sell. They weren't seriously pursuing a sale, as far as I understand. They were pursuing legal challenges. On Friday, the Supreme Court upheld the law, decided against TikTok and ByteDance. Now, I haven't read the Supreme Court's reasoning, so I just know the conclusion. The law that was passed stands. TikTok faces a mandate to sell or get out of the country or not operate here. Okay. So up against the deadline, which is right now, TikTok doesn't have an American buyer or a plan to secure one, so it was facing the ban hammer. And then, even though, we're all saying TikTok got banned, that's effectively what the law did. But my understanding is TikTok actually, they shut down themselves, and then the app stores removed them to avoid potential fines or other punishment. It's not like the government went in and deleted these things. They did it themselves to try to avoid the consequences of the law. That's how this happened. And then, okay, so what just happened to bring it back online? Well, the law allows the president under some circumstances, which may or may not apply here. I'm not entirely clear on the law, but under some circumstances, the president can grant a 90-day extension on the deadline, according to the law. So effectively, that's what Trump is saying he's going to do. Now, Biden had already said he wasn't going to enforce the ban, even though he's the guy who signed it. I don't understand anybody on this, because why are you signing the bill into law if you don't intend to enforce that law? Maybe it's because he wanted a sale and the sale didn't. I don't know. But Biden's saying he's not going to enforce it, even though he signed it. And then Trump is coming back in tomorrow, and he's offering this extension. And so ByteDance is saying, well, we feel confident enough to bring TikTok back. So they've brought it back online. Now, in his statement that Trump put out on Truth Social, he's saying he wants the U.S. to have 50% ownership in the company ByteDance under a joint venture. Now, when he says the U.S., it's unclear what exactly he means. Does he mean the United States government or a U.S. company? I assume he means a U.S. company, that ByteDance, a Chinese company, would have a joint venture or a 50% partnership with a U.S. company, and Trump would find that satisfactory. Either way, I'm confused about that too, because that's not necessarily the terms of the law. The law says you need to sell to an American. If you're deemed a foreign, a piece of tech operated by a foreign adversary, you need to sell to, as declared by the president at least, you need to sell to an American operator. Now, maybe that's the distinction, is Trump is going to rescind that presidential declaration. Although, isn't that, I thought that was part of the statute. Anyway, sorry for confusion. This whole thing is very confusing, and I'm not sure I follow it completely because there's all sorts of backtracking and just reversals and people changing their minds, and it's hard to follow. Anyway, so TikTok is confident that Trump is going to work with them. They bring it back online. Trump is saying we're going to work out some deal where there's some sort of partnership to operate this company. And that's how we get to where we are. Now, how should we understand this is a second question. What happened is the first. The second is how should we understand this? All I can do is offer how I understand it. Now, as I mentioned, personally, I don't like TikTok just as a format. I'm not into the like YouTube shorts and the quick viral video. It's just not for me. That's for the kids these days. I'm too old for that, I guess. I also don't like China. I don't like Chinese communists. I don't like anything about TikTok or who operates it or any of that stuff. I also don't like Trojan horses for government control. So I'm still very skeptical of this TikTok ban and its implementation. Let me explain. In principle, as I was getting into during the super chat there, I don't necessarily have a problem with limiting the role of China in our country. Now, I think China and their commie ways are largely adversarial to our country. I think the federal government wouldn't necessarily be outside of its role or its scope in reducing or stopping really Chinese imports of any kind if we wanted to do that. And therefore, I don't think the federal government is outside its role in stopping a Chinese social media platform if they want to. And to that extent, I don't really see this as a First Amendment issue or a free speech issue. Insofar as the First Amendment doesn't mean that you have a right to say Chinese produced paper if we decided we wanted to ban the importation of Chinese produced paper. Or if we wanted to stop importing Chinese made phones. Is that a First Amendment free speech issue because you can't necessarily talk on a Chinese made phone? Now, we could debate the wisdom of that. Like, should we import these goods? Is it smart to? Does it benefit us or does it harm us? Okay, I'm not making commentary on that. I'm just saying, is it a First Amendment free speech issue if you're not able to buy Chinese-made paper or a Chinese-made phone? I don't think so. I think the First Amendment, the principles of free speech, means you have the right to speak your perspective freely. And you can still do that on all the American territory that you want, with all the American products that you want. What I'm saying is I don't think that the First Amendment requires foreign access to our markets. That's another way of phrasing it. So if the law said, TikTok is Chinese nonsense, if it wants to operate in America, it needs to sell to Americans, otherwise get out. In principle, I don't necessarily have a problem with that. However, does the law actually say that? Kind of. But it's also very broad, and we all need to be aware of that. It says that the president is given authority, given control on what is defined as a so-called foreign adversary-controlled application. Again, this in the president's judgment. In the president's judgment, if you're operating a foreign adversary-controlled application, then the federal government, through the president, can force a sale. And then there are some limitations. The president has to submit a certain report to Congress, and there are other small hoops he has to jump through. He doesn't have total and complete power, but he has a lot of power. And I just think these are determinations that should be made much more specifically by Congress, not by presidential whim or presidential wand, for the president to just ban whatever he considers to be a foreign adversary application whenever he would like to do that. So what is the intent and what is the effect? That is to say, is this actually about limiting China and Chinese influence, or is it about something else? Now, if it is about limiting China, again, I'm not a huge fan of China. I don't have a problem in principle with limiting Chinese influence and Chinese involvement with our country. But why do we seem to care about Chinese influence, Chinese involvement, just in this context of a social media app? As Congressman Thomas Massey asked when the bill was under consideration, why don't we care about everything else that's made in China that comes to this country? Why do we just care about this app?
You know, we're sitting here with phones made in China. We're wearing suits made in China. We drove cars here with chips that are made in China. And they're our foreign adversary. And by golly, we're going to do something about it. What are we going to do? We're going to tell Americans they can't put a piece of software on their computer. They can't go to certain websites that the president designates. So I urge my colleagues to oppose this well-intentioned bill because it will have bad consequences, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Well, maybe all the Chinese crap we import, all the plastic cheap toys or, cheap clothes or whatever, that's not necessarily a national security concern, you might argue. It's a national security concern when we have internet-connected applications that are sharing data across the globe. Okay. But per Massey's point, there are all kinds of Chinese electronics, Chinese technology that absolutely have the same sort of national security concerns. It's not just cheap crap that you buy at Walmart. It's things that are connected to the internet or other methods of communication. If we care so much about Chinese influence, Chinese involvement in our country, as was discussed on Twitter this week, per this graphic posted by Riley Gaines, we got a lot of Chinese-owned farmland, lots of which is very near our military bases. That also seems to be a national security concern if China is a foreign adversary. Now, of course, if you are serious about China, you got to start somewhere. Okay, we have a giant mountain of Chinese infiltration to clean up, so we're starting with TikTok. And then we're going to move on to the rest. Just because you can point to other Chinese infiltration doesn't mean that the TikTok ban is bad or that TikTok is good. Could just mean that we're starting there and then we're going to move on to all these other problems. But are we actually starting there? As in, once we're done with the TikTok ban, are we going to get to the rest of the Chinese infiltration, or we're just going to wipe our hands and say, we did it. We got them. Chinese are under control now. Or maybe we're not going to maybe we're not going to move on to all these other pieces of Chinese influence and involvement that matter. And if so, maybe this is to serve another purpose. When you force a sale, the question is, who is in position to buy? Presumably, the price for an app like TikTok, a very popular one, maybe the most popular one, I don't know, but price on that's got to be awfully high. Market value of TikTok, very high. Also, the knowledge for how to operate TikTok, pretty specific. If you handed me the keys to TikTok, I don't know how the hell to run TikTok. I don't know how to run an app like that. I don't know how to run a giant website. I don't know how to do any of that. So who you're selling to is a question of the financial resources and the know-how. Okay? Who are those people who possibly could do that, who have the money and have the knowledge? Well, presumably that would be American social media companies. You can think Meta. You can think Google. It's not necessarily a social media company, but you get what I mean. American tech companies, American internet companies. Maybe X? I don't know, something like that. Now, maybe the price gets knocked down. TikTok, of course, is very valuable. Maybe the price gets knocked down because the sale is forced rather than voluntary. But that would mean what? That would mean these American tech companies are in better position to buy than they otherwise would be, which means they are assisted in taking out a competitor. So what happens here if this goes through as originally planned? I know Trump is talking about this 50% joint venture. Maybe that happens. I'm assuming it goes to the original plan. What happens? Well, American social media companies, American tech companies, which have been very corrupt in their own ways, very censorship happy in their own ways, certainly spied on you plenty in their own ways. They now have this government assisted way of knocking out their competition. And again, I'm not saying that, our tech companies are exactly the same as the Chinese communists. That's not, but I'm just saying these people are not, the American tech companies are not necessarily friendly to the supposed principles we're defending here. Like free speech, security from foreign intervention, all that sort of stuff. And the other complicating factor, and this is just, it's speculative. I'm not accusing anybody in particular, but certainly there are members of Congress who own stock in a lot of these companies. And so they stand to benefit when those companies are able to knock out some of their most successful competition. That situation is hard to ignore. But even if it's not financial, even if it's not like, oh, these companies are really going to cash in and members of Congress who own a lot of stock in these companies are going to earn a lot of money, even if it's not financial, members of Congress may actually just gain more control over social media through this gesture as well. And the president by extension, because now this particular app, this piece of social media, that's in American hands. They can boss it around much more easily. And again, I know China, obviously not a friend of free speech, but is our Congress inherently a friend of free speech? Are these tech companies inherently friends of free speech? They may be better on it. I'm not saying they're full-blown Chinese commies. Do I trust these people a lot either? No, of course not. So is the TikTok ban actually about national security from this Chinese threat? Which again, I grant is a legitimate adversarial relationship at best, a threat at worst. Or is it just about seizing control into their hands? And personally, I suspect it's much more of the latter. Again, since these people don't seem to care very much about limiting China in other contexts, we import so much crap from China. We've got Chinese ownership of so much of our land. There is Chinese influence all over our country, and all of a sudden TikTok is the most dangerous element of that. It does seem like there are some ulterior motives at play, and we'll see how this plays out. For now, enjoy your TikToks, I guess, because they're back online. Is that what they're called? The videos, are they called TikToks? I don't know. I'm too old and disconnected to even know what they call them. But speaking of old and disconnected, at least I'm not Joe Biden. At least I have that going for me. But in other power grabs, Joe Biden, the famous self-declared institution respecter, he just bizarrely declared a new constitutional amendment on X on Friday. In a tweet, Biden said, quote, "Today I'm affirming what I have long believed and what 3/4 of the states have ratified. The 28th Amendment is the law of the land and guaranteeing all Americans equal rights and protections under the law, regardless of their sex." Okay, so we just have a new presidentially declared constitutional amendment over the weekend. Wow, imagine that. Now, what is the Equal Rights Amendment that he's talking about? Well, the Equal Rights Amendment has been a long proposed constitutional amendment that would explicitly protect against sex discrimination. Now, as a practical matter, the Supreme Court has already interpreted protection against sex discrimination as part of the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. In such cases, they apply what's called intermediate scrutiny against laws that may violate the prohibition on sex discrimination. But under this standard, laws making sex distinctions must further an important government interest by means that are substantially related to that interest. That's technical language, but this standard of review that is applied to sex discrimination by the Supreme Court as interpreted through the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, it's something between rational basis and when the court is reviewing laws that may be unconstitutional, when there's no explicit fundamental right at stake, rational basis review is the standard. Like, does the government have a rational basis for this law? If so, it's presumed to be constitutionally square. Now, when you get into laws, like say maybe, I assume there was some of this in that recent TikTok case to the extent there may be free speech considerations. Or let's just say there was a law passed that that seriously restricted your freedom of speech and had serious First Amendment considerations. Well, then the court would apply what's called strict scrutiny. The government has to advance a compelling state interest through narrowly tailored means would be the standard there. So intermediate scrutiny is something in between. A step above rational basis, a step below strict scrutiny. Why? Because there are important constitutional anti-discrimination pieces there, but what's also true about sex? Well, there are very meaningful distinctions between men and women that the law is perfectly justified in recognizing. In fact, it's very important that the law recognizes these distinctions because men and women are not the same thing. In fact, our society is built on that. So that understanding is where sex discrimination fits in the Constitution as understood by the Supreme Court. Currently, the Equal Rights Amendment seeks to take it out of the Supreme Court's hands, put it explicitly into the constitutional text itself, and say something to the effect of sex discrimination is unconstitutional. And it's a very simple 3-section proposed amendment. And the substance of it is really Section 1. Equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. But you can see, okay, as I'll get to, this has been proposed for decades, dating back to like 1920, and then it got a lot of momentum in the 70s. And at the time, you could see what they're talking about. Like they're talking about men and women. Okay, but these days, with language that broad, like if a state wants to say, we're going to have, like, we want to administer our school sports and these are women's sports and only women can participate in them. Okay, all of a sudden, like if you don't let the tranny guy in there, that's a constitutional issue, which they already try to do. Or maybe you want to have separate bathrooms in your public facilities. All of a sudden, that's a constitutional issue. Anyway, all I'm saying is given the blurred lines with gender these days, empowering the federal government, Merrick Garland and company through the Justice Department, to go kick down more doors on the basis of sex discrimination, very bad idea. Though I recognize the people who were pushing this decades ago weren't thinking a lot of the things that people these days are thinking. But okay, that's all the technicals. Let's get back to where Joe Biden is actually coming from. Because how the hell did Joe Biden just declare this constitutional amendment to stop sex discrimination? Okay. As I mentioned, this idea goes back a long, long time. But for the purposes of this discussion, in 1978 or 1972, Congress actually proposed this constitutional amendment. So if you remember your constitutional amendment process, through supermajorities in both houses, Congress can propose an amendment. It then goes to the states to ratify that amendment. So Congress did that with this Equal Rights Amendment in 1972, and they gave the states a 7-year deadline for ratification. And then 7 years came and went, and only 35 states had ratified this proposed Equal Rights Amendment. And actually 5 of those states then rescinded their ratification later. So really only 30 were in for ratification at the deadline. 3/4 are required. That's 38 out of 50. They only had 30, but 35 maybe. But again, 5 were rescinded. Anyway, they didn't have enough constitutionally. And then so Congress actually extended the deadline in 1982. 7 years wasn't enough. Okay, how about 3 more years? 1982. Well, this happened after Jimmy Carter's DOJ issued an opinion saying, yeah, Congress has that power to extend the deadline. Sure. It seems like maybe Congress could do that, but there was a problem with how they did it. And this is why Trump's DOJ in 2020 disagreed, changed the understanding there. They said that extension was only passed by a simple majority, which it was. Now, if Congress is going to propose a constitutional amendment, they need supermajorities. They didn't extend the deadline by supermajorities. They did it by simple majority. Thus, it is highly debatable, indeed doubtful, that the extension was constitutional at all. Now, eventually, by 2020, decades after the fact, 38 states had ratified the amendment. Like Virginia and some others got around to it eventually. But again, you only get to 38 by not considering the 5 that rescinded their ratification and by going way outside the deadline that Congress had put on this process. So counting 38 3/4, no. You only do that by breaking the rules. And so that is what Biden is counting here. Oh, see, eventually 38 states got around to it. And so Biden is just declaring the 28th Amendment because 38 states did it eventually. We now have the Equal Rights Amendment against sex discrimination. Now, of course, it's all for show. The amendment is not going to be recognized by the Supreme Court. Trump will probably come out sometime this week and issue a similar declaration. No, that is not a valid constitutional amendment. That's all bullshit. even if there is some ambiguity about the status of the amendment, like, oh, could we go to court and challenge whether this was actually ratified or not? Well, amendments are not declared into the Constitution by presidents. Again, a fancy graphic here. The Equal Rights Amendment is now the law of the land. Formally, the president has no role in constitutional amendments. Again, you have two paths. Congress can propose it for state ratification, which is the path they tried to take here, or the states can propose and ratify a constitutional amendment themselves through a convention of states. But there's no formal role for the president in either process other than he can use his bully pulpit. He can influence people. He can say he supports this. He can try to lobby people. But the president does not declare. President Biden declares the Equal Rights Amendment is now the law of the land. That's not a thing. That is constitutional nonsense. You made that up. But the graphic looks fancy, so good for you. But again, this comes from whom? This comes from norm and institution respecter man, Joe Biden, telling us how big of a fan of norms and institutions he is. Here he is in his farewell address on Wednesday night saying exactly that.
After 50 years at the center of all of this, I know that believing in the idea of America means respecting the institutions that govern a free society. The presidency, the Congress, the courts, a free and independent press. Institutions that are rooted, they just might not reflect the timeless words, but they echo the words of the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident. Rooted in the timeless words of the Constitution, we the people. Our system of separation of powers, checks and balances. It may not be perfect, but it's maintained our democracy for nearly 250 years.
Yet we respect the Constitution by rewriting it on a whim. We respect checks and balances by taking constitutional powers away from the states, away from Congress, just declaring them presidential powers instead. Yet we love free speech and the free press and the First Amendment, except for when, anybody exercising those rights criticizes me in my White House, or when those things exist outside of my control. Then they're shameful. Remember Joe Biden said that last week when he was talking about Mark Zuckerberg scaling back on the fact checks. Also seemed to be referencing Elon Musk buying X. Oh, that's shameful that they're allowing people to have information freely, to speak about that information freely. That's actually anti-American, is what Joe Biden was saying. But I got to give Joe Biden credit where he's earned it. At least this time, he mostly got the Declaration of Independence reference right. That's a great improvement over his last attempt during the 2020 campaign.
We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by you know the thing.
So he's really ending his presidency on a high note of improvement. Good for him. Recognition where earned. All right, it is time for Hoax Hate.
Now, the nobody saw it happen, but it's totally a product of Trump's America hoax hate crime of the week.
Ah, shit, it's backwards. You think they'll notice? All right, returning to last week's story about the Allentown, Pennsylvania government employee who has been in various disputes with coworkers and city government in general, alleging racial abuse and discrimination at work. Well, that was all until she supposedly found a noose at her desk the week before last. Even though, as far as I have been able to search, we still have, there's no image, there's no video of this supposed noose. We have no idea what this item even is because nobody will show us. But protesters assembled outside City Hall to call for not just justice in the matter of this mystery noose, but for the FBI to take over the investigation. Remember, what we're talking about is probably a string discovered on a desk. The FBI needs to get involved. Community activist Pat Simpson said, quote, it has to go federal because this is a hate crime. We discovered a string, and so this is a matter for federal law enforcement. He urged residents to flood the FBI tip line, which, of course, is for tips. You call the FBI tip line to give them information. You don't call the FBI tip line to lobby their participation in investigations or to try to get particular charges, which is what he's talking about. And the problem here is nobody actually has any tips to bring to the FBI tip line because this did not happen. Doesn't matter, though. The feds heeded the call because, of course, they did. The feds have now joined the investigation. And last week or the week before last, this was a matter for local police squad cars to flip on their sirens and hurry down to City Hall to investigate what, again, is believed to be a string or some sort of thin rope discovered in the general area of a desk. And now it's a matter for the FBI, federal law enforcement, to get involved with. And as I mentioned last week, we all know what happened here. This is a woman of color involved in some sort of workplace dispute, and she is trying to find ways to exercise leverage in that workplace dispute. So she has now planted a noose or a noose-like object at or around her desk, and she's going to use this to get what she wants at work. Maybe she'll file a lawsuit to collect a check as well. So stand by for that version of events to be realized. I'm sure it will shortly. Also, in Grand Junction, Colorado, Tiffany Abadi is the mother of an unnamed teenager. She alleges that while she and her son were out on vacation recently, teen hoodlums planted a road sign on her son's car, and the road sign had offensive slurs and symbols on it. Police and the local prosecutor investigated. They determined it was not a hate crime under the law, but mom is not satisfied. And so now she's talking to local media. Now, the audio in this local news report is kind of rough, but that's how they aired it. So sorry about that.
A teenager in Olathe was recently an alleged victim of what a concerned mother calls a hate crime.
While the family was on vacation, a friend who was watching over their place called concerned. The friend found this road sign on the son's car with slurs and offensive symbols on it.
So I called the police and I made a report. And I didn't hear anything back that day. They called me the next day and they said that it would not be considered a hate crime because they can't determine that it's racially motivated.
Anna Kueng, the new 7th Judicial District Attorney, tells us this matter doesn't fall under a hate crime. She says, quote, per the statute, the incident was not a hate crime as the facts of the case do not meet the elements of CRS 18-9-121.
And I don't understand how that's possible with what they wrote on it.
CRS 18-9-121 states a person commits a bias-motivated crime with the intent to intimidate or harass someone if they knowingly cause bodily harm to another or damage personal property.
I feel like in smaller communities, the minorities really get the short end of the stick. And it shows that people's actions can go without consequences.
Abadi says this isn't the first time her son has allegedly been targeted. She claims kids have egged his car and bothered him at work. Abadi says she wants police to take action and charge those responsible.
I want them to show proof that there is escalating events, and I want them to charge them with a hate crime.
Yeah, other people must provide evidence for your claims. Okay. Now, it's not a hate crime because there's actually no crime element. Again, it's not the hate that is a crime in a hate crime. It is a crime committed with some sort of hateful or discriminatory intent. But the crime element is still necessary, as in I punched someone, I stole from someone, I committed some sort of criminal act with a hateful intent. But just the hate itself is not criminal because, of course, you have a right to your opinion. You have a right to your speech. Okay. There's no criminal element here because it doesn't sound like it was her or her son's road sign. I don't know where the sign came from. Maybe it's government property, construction company property. It's just a sign. And it's a sign that was placed on their property. But per the description here, they didn't damage the property. They didn't threaten anybody. You can think of it as a strange note, really. And so mom's reason for calling it a hate crime is not an actual crime element. It's just the content of the speech. She says in that report, well, I don't know how it's not a hate crime with what they wrote on it. Well, okay, what did they write on it? Now it's blurred, it's censored, but I see an N, so I assume that is part of it.
He said the N-word.
I also see an F.
You're a faggot.
Which I assume is the other word there. And then of course, there's the customarily backward swastika as well. But you are allowed to say the N-word legally. You are allowed to say the F-word legally. You're also allowed to draw a backward swastika legally. There's no property crime or vandalism component in this case, at least as alleged. There's no violence component in this case, as alleged. There's not even a threat of violence. There's just bad words spray painted on a sign that does not belong to these people. So there's no crime component in this case. There's only speech. Again, hate crime still means crime. The hate itself is not the criminal component. There's got to be a criminal component independent of the hate, and that's just lacking in this case. And I love what Mom said in there too. Oh, you know what else is evidence of a hate crime? They bothered my son at work. They bothered my son at work one time. Okay, you know what this sounds like? This sounds like general high school tomfoolery, general high school rivalry, and Mom, I guess, wants the police to come lock up kids over it. Well, you know what, Mom? I suggest you go find your son's dad to handle such matters, if such a thing is even possible. I'm sure he's coming back from his trip to the gas station to get cigarettes very soon. But none of this is a matter for the law or for police, hence why prosecutors and police are saying that publicly. Now, interesting story out of Spain. There's this town in Spain I can't pronounce. I'll try it. Torrecaballeros in Spain. There's a socialist mayor there named Ruben Garcia de Andres, who is gay. And this gay mayor is now accusing Spain's Catholic Church of a hate crime. Well, did Spain's Catholic Church attack him? Did they steal from him? Again, what is the criminal element here? What crime did they commit? No, they won't give him communion at church, so it's a hate crime. Now, I guess at this according to the accusation, this church they're not big on the gays, though they have their own explanation for that, which I'll get to in a moment. But the accusation is they don't want to do gay stuff. They don't want gay guys there. And so that's some kind of hate crime not to allow gay guys to be there. But the mayor is now banned from this church. He can't participate. The bishop at this church says it's not about being gay. This is not about anti-gay discrimination. It's actually about following the canons of the Catholic Church, which say that any couples living together out of wedlock, whether they're gay or straight, and apparently this mayor does, he lives with a man, I guess. If you live with someone else out of wedlock, you can be refused the sacrament. Now, I don't know how the Spanish legal system will deal with this dispute. I don't know what kind of anti-discrimination law may apply. You can see the general direction this stuff goes, though. Now it's a hate crime just to be like, no, thank you. I do not wish to associate with you. It's a hate crime just to be like, please go away. That's a hate crime. But even beyond that, traditional religion, traditional morality, those are now discriminatory and thus illegal, or maybe soon to be illegal. And so by law, at least in the direction this stuff is going, your church must accept or even celebrate behavior it would not by traditional religious teaching. So we'll see. We'll see if church personnel are convicted for the hate crime of saying no thank you to a gay man. We'll watch that. And staying in Europe, this in London. Now, unfortunately, another transgender fraudulent blowy has struck again, or new video of the aftermath is now available. Now, just to catch up people who don't know what I mean by that, almost all of you do, but to fill in those who don't, remember, whenever we hear the supposed trans genocide case, oh, there's a genocide against transgender people. The idea is what? That transgender people are murdered or attacked at some elevated rate for hateful reasons, transphobic reasons. Well, number one, they aren't. Transgender people are murdered at a rate lower than the general population in the United States. Number two, many of those murder cases, they're not even murders. Many of them are self-defense. Many of them are police interactions. Some of them are just deaths otherwise. Of the ones that are actually homicides, as in person A kills person B, if they're not, police involvement, self-defense scenarios, very often they are a result of fraudulent sexual activity. As in, a transgender person deceives another person into believing they are the gender that they claim to be, not the gender that they actually are. And then what? A sexual act happens. And then after realizing that they just had gay sex or participated in a gay sex act, the person deceived becomes very angry and retaliates with violence. That is the fraudulent blowing. Okay. In London last year, this is last February, an 18-year-old aspiring transgender model, who's unnamed in this report, was beaten and stabbed by a group of fellow young people led by an 18-year-old woman named Summer Betts Ramsey. And this happened outside of a roller skating party, this beating. Speaking of gay, that sounds pretty gay. But okay, I have to defend my dignity after this roller skating party. But okay, whatever. I guess I don't understand London culture. Now you can watch the footage of this beating and this stabbing. It's in this Daily Mail article, linked in the description as always, or linked in the show sources. I'll put it there. There is nothing I can play about this because I think I'll attract the wrath of Raja Mahan on YouTube. But if you want to see it, it is out there. Now, why did this mob beat up and stab this person? Well, it's right there at the top of the story. It's because this transgender person performed a sex act on one of these young men after lying about his gender identity before performing the sex act on a boy, according to the story. And this mob has now been identified now that they're on trial for the attack, and they're facing sentencing. Now, I'm not saying that mob justice is a preferable or ideal form of justice. It's not. Here's some images from the arrest scenes. But the question is, why is the trans person not charged? Because the trans person lied about who he was and engaged in sexual activity with another person based on that lie. Now, if you don't use the word rape to describe that scenario, it's something rape adjacent, because the guy who engaged in sexual activity with this transgender person, he can't consent to that activity with fraudulent information. And that fraudulent false information was deliberately provided by this transgender person. So if there's no charge for that transgender person, the only available justice for the injustice of lying about being a woman when you're not, and then performing sex acts based on that lie, the only available justice, if the justice system will not correct that matter, is mob justice. That's why you're seeing this happen. And so the ringleader of the beating, she's now going to serve 4.5 years in a juvenile facility, according to this report. She's going to spend 4.5 years in detainment, some kind of jail or whatever. And the transgender person has no punishment at all. And the story, you read through it, this is the Daily Mail, repeatedly refers to the transgender person as the victim. Now, I get it. Again, we don't necessarily want mob beatings as our form of justice in a civilized country. Now, mob behavior can sometimes be correct, but very often it's not. Point is, original aggression committed in this situation was committed by this transgender person. Victim ignores that reality. Original aggression of lying about what sex you are in pursuit of sexual activity with someone else based on fraud, based on a lie, that aggression was committed by who they're calling the victim in this case. And the more this lie of transgenderism grows, the more everybody's going to be victimized in this way. People are going to be tricked into fraudulent sex acts. And then what? The retaliation is going to happen. The saying is the beatings will continue until morale improves. In this case, it's the beatings will continue until the truth improves. And please don't misunderstand Raja Mohan or anybody else. I don't want the beatings. I want the truth. And when everyone is truthful, contrary to all of this transgender lie nonsense, the beatings are going to get reduced. The truth will reduce the beatings. It will not cause the beatings. So let's get more acquainted with the truth in the hope of stopping this sort of thing. But speaking of transgender insanity and the need for justice, this week a disabled transgender person in Minnesota went viral. Now, the original video showed a severely disabled young woman in a wheelchair who has scars from mastectomy, breast removal, that was done for gender transition reasons. And I can't show you those images, again, likely ban bait, but you can see it on X. Of course, I'll link it in the show sources. Andy No confirms after a little bit of digging into it, the person is a 19-year-old disabled young woman who was given hormones in high school. And yes, recently had surgery to remove her breasts. This as confirmed not by some deep dive into just what the parents are posting on social media. Andy No has been looking at this. And they've been fundraising on this insanity. Again, here's an image of this person severely disabled talking about getting top surgery for gender transition reasons. Again, you can read all about this through Andy No. Straight to jail for everybody involved in a sane society. This is sick, twisted abuse of a helpless person. And instead, I'm sure, not only does this get celebrated by many, they probably received public funding in Minnesota to do this because, of course, that'd be right on brand.
I've become friends with school shooters.
Or probably friends with abusers of disabled young people, too. But as we've discussed at length this evening, Godspeed in that state, Godspeed to this poor young woman. Hope there will be justice for her someday. But that is what I have for you this evening. Let me check in with our super chatters before we call it a night. Let me give a quick refresh over on YouTube and Tippy Stream. We're good on Rumble. Let me see on Odyssey. Let's see. Blanket says, Matt, when you have time, please read the new post from Odyssey. They're removing Stripe and doing away with monetization of channels, or doing a new way. I did receive an email about that. Yeah. I don't know what their new system is going to be. Of course, when I sit down to do my various desk work this week, I will try to do what I can to comply with Odyssey's change in how they process payments. And I don't know how that's going to work, but I'm going to do my best to maintain super chatting ability over there. And of course, thank you for supporting the show that way, Blankets. It's very much appreciated. We're good on DLive. Let me check in on YouTube and Tippy here. Let's see what we got. Daniel Yeager. Bannon calls it a fourth turning. Lots of parallels from this era back 150 years ago. Trump is the man in the arena. I mean, I hate to be like, I don't mean to be pessimistic or worried. Like this is an historic moment coming up tomorrow. This is a major piece of American history. You know, even if you don't like Donald Trump politically, you don't like what he stands for, you disagree with his policies, you got to recognize the political comeback. And that is definitely historic. We're watching history in action tomorrow, something that we probably won't see again for our entire lifetimes. And I'm trying my best not to be like worried or pessimistic. How could I not be after the last, 4+ years of total insanity, of every possible strategic move being made in the most dishonest ways possible. And now I'm supposed to just not expect that tomorrow, but maybe that's the ultimate trick. Maybe he is a man of destiny and that destiny is going to be realized tomorrow. I'm tuning in for the show, of course. Thank you, Daniel Yeager, and Godspeed. Injured Guardian. Tippy Stream rejects me for the same foolish reason as Odyssey. I shouldn't need any subscribers in order to give some money. Maybe I'll badger Rumble over the phone. Maybe, or send him an email. You know, I've not had a lot of tech problems with Rumble. The few that I've had, I've emailed them generally, and they've been very responsive and helped me out. So I'd encourage you to try it that way. But send me an email, Injured Guardian, about Tippy Stream, because there's no subscriber requirement or anything like that. It's you, as far as I'm aware, you do need a PayPal account to do it, but that would be it. There's nothing else. So if there's some sort of rejection, that I'd like to hear what that is, because I'm not familiar with anybody else having that. Anyway, thank you for your support for the show. It is very much appreciated.
We love you. You're very special.
Walsey, should the Republican House start the impeachment of Donald Trump just to get the ball rolling? It's inevitable in the next 4 years. That would actually be a great piece of trolling. Like, no, we're going to start impeachment, and we're going to bring up bogus charges just to I guess get out ahead of you guys and do your own show better than you do. That would be hilarious to watch. But I guess then, I mean, you could do a joke impeachment. That'd be a huge waste of time, of course, even though the show would be pretty funny. There's nothing to say you couldn't do the whole trial and then just everybody in the Senate says no at the end. I guess is how that would go. Esoterica Unbound, TikTok and its imitators are some truly evil shit. The format exploits the seek-reward circuits of the brain, making them addictive and destructive to cognition, much like online porn, just without any happy ending. Yeah, I mean, I guess I just haven't subjected myself to that format of content very much. It's not, based on what I've seen, it's not what I want or what I like. I don't like to go from like short chaotic video to short chaotic video. I want to hear something longer, something more coherent, something more interesting, something in depth. And maybe that's not what a lot of other people want to see. There's a reason that sort of content is successful. And there's a reason why it's very hard to make long form content like this successful. And I assume what the market wants is a large part of that. So whatever that is, clearly it has appeal that I don't personally get. But I wouldn't be surprised if you're right. If it's more than just a trend, that there's something like biological, physiological about it. That certainly could be the case. Thank you, Esoterica Unbound. Lord Stockingham Puppeton III, speaking of chat characters. I was rather pleased to hear Mr. Hunkybuck refer to a cigarette by its British name tonight. I'll never understand why you Yanks get so uptight about that word. I guess it has something to do with the poofters across the pond.
Shut up, faggot.
Shut up, British cigarette. I don't know what a poofter is. Is that a typo or is that a real word? Can I look? Let me look this up. Make sure I'm understanding what the hell this is. Oh, it is that a British thing? Yeah, it's like I guess it's like a British word.
Poofter.
Poofter. Well, I guess they put it in the poofter, but it's pronounced poofter.
Poofter.
A gay man, offensive British slang, a man who is seen as unmasculine, timid, or affected.
Poofter.
Okay. Well, that's a new entry in my vocabulary, I guess.
Many of those people probably have AIDS.
What? I think we're all set. Let me give a quick refresh here. Yeah. Good on Rumble, good on YouTube and Tippy, good on Odyssey, good on DLive, which means it is time to call it a night. So thank you for tuning in this evening. Thank you to the live chatters, super chatters, everybody else participating live for making the live production a success. Hey, if you're listening on demand later, thank you kindly as well for supporting the show. Very much appreciated, however you choose to listen. Thanks again to my guest, Liz Collin. Find her at alphanews.org or at Liz Collin on X, thefallofminneapolis.com to watch her documentary, all linked in the description for you. Thanks to producer Tim for his assistance this evening. As always, if you'd like to find more to listen to, check out the podcast page on my website, mattchristiansenmedia.com/podcasts. There you can find not just the video show, but the audio show too, if you prefer to listen on an audio podcast platform. Anything else show related, mattchristiansenmedia.com is where you find it, or mattis.gay if you prefer brevity. I'm back, of course, on Sunday and Wednesday nights. Have a great night and a great week.